English translation, 249th. Contact, Monday, 13th June, 1994, 23:36 hours.
Hello, Eduard, my friend.
Hello, too. I'm happy to see you.
Unfortunately, it took me some time to get here because you were busy and I did not want to disturb you. But the time slowly became too long for me, so I had to resort to cunning with tiredness. I did it only reluctantly because
You should not talk so loud, because as you can see, the door to Eva's office is still open. She is over there.
do not worry because she's fast asleep and cannot hear us. She will only wake up again when I am no longer here.
Well, that calms me down. So, could I start with my questions right away?
First, I would like to give you the information you asked me to give at our last meeting, but these explanations should not necessarily be written down when you write down the report about our conversation.
Of course. The easiest way to do this is, as always, to simply omit the corresponding passage when transmitting the conversation.
That is also how I will do it. But listen now, and then arrange everything according to my explanations.
Thank you for your comments.
Please explain my regret as well, but unfortunately I could not do it otherwise, including the prolonged persistence of the symptom.
I think that you will be given the necessary understanding, and your actions will be properly understood. I think that everything is seen and understood from a humorous point of view.
Then I am reassured. So bring up your questions.
My first question once again refers to UFO sightings and so-called abductions by aliens. Can you tell me the number of alien races that are currently flying to and from the Earth, or conducting their studies here, or are otherwise active here?
For many years they have always been the same, and in their number only 3. Our behavior towards them is that we observe them, and we do not interfere in their doings, activities, and actions, so they also have no knowledge of our existence.
And do these 3 alien races have contacts with Earth humans, or have they maintained contacts with Earth humans of a simple kind, or to the military, etc.?
Already in a previous conversation, I have stated that I am not allowed to give any official information. Regarding any concerns, if the questions refer to official or military concerns in connection with possibilities of contacts with non-terrestrial human intelligences.
Well, then what about ordinary Earth citizens?
There are no contacts existing between the 3 groups or alien races, except for investigation contacts in which terrestrial humans, plants and animals are, or were, actually contacted for test and investigation purposes, which does not mean, however, that the mass hysteria and mass psychosis of all those are actually based on such experiences, which claim that they have been kidnapped and investigated or even impregnated by alien beings. Truthfully, there are always only isolated cases here and there all over the world, which are extremely rare, but which cannot be regarded as contacts in the sense of an actual contact in the context of our case. From our entire side, there is also only in your case such a contact and no others, not even in telepathic form. Contacts that we maintain with Earth humans are purely impulse telepathic, so the persons contacted in this manner have no knowledge of it and assume that everything created by them is their very own work. Truthfully, however, much of the information for that which is created and products, etc., comes from us, brought into the human beings through the impulse telepathy contacts, which in any case are always unconscious for the recipient, so that he or she has no idea that the information, etc., is being impulse telepathically planted into him or her.
When Earth humans are lifted into extraterrestrial flying apparatuses and examined by extraterrestrial human intelligences for examination purposes, you do not call these processes actual contacts, but rather investigation contacts. Together with Hans, I have coined the term examination contact in this context. Could this term be used?
This terminology is actually very good. Examination contact. This term also removes the sting from untruth that terrestrial humans would be kidnapped by alien beings. The truth is that the Earth foreigners, the extra-humanoids, see nothing wrong and, above all, no abduction in their examination contacts, but only a humane means to an end in order to carry out incidental studies from which new knowledge, etc., is gained.
What about the fact that UFO sightings are made all over the world again and again? They cannot all be real.
That is right, but we have talked about it a lot. Very few percentages correspond to actual sightings. The rest is based on sensory illusions, charlatanism, dizziness, lies and deception, etc.
What is this about? Quetzal once explained to me, as did Simyase, that Dan Fry, an American, had indeed had contact with extraterrestrials and had also taken photos, but that he had then destroyed these photos. After which, someone had made fakes and planted them on him, so that today there are no real photos of extraterrestrial flying objects that can be traced back to Dan Fry. The story about the origin of the extraterrestrials and their statements are also said to have been thoroughly falsified. Quetzal explained this to me once, without this appearing in a contact report.
This corresponds to the actual events.
Well, then something about the pyramids. Recently I got a call from someone who deals commercially with pyramids. Of course, I did not give him any information due to the commercial nature. On the other hand, I did not give any information because pyramids are not as harmless as Earth humans generally assume. It is a fact that not any material may be used for meditation pyramids, but only copper, because it is conductive for electrical energy, and does not unleash in the interior of the pyramid those powers which can be psychologically dangerous for humans, as is the case with non-conductive material. Pyramids made of non-conductive material, such as stone, plastic, glass and crystal, etc., have the property that cell tissue mummifies inside and in the right place. Cutting tools can change under certain circumstances, because enormous forces gather at the right point due to the shape of the pyramid and influence everything there, which, however, does not happen with a conductive pyramid made of copper, because under certain conditions, such as mass, and tenor and elevation, in the pyramid it is not possible to mummify the material. On the one hand, completely different and invigorating forces are developed, and which are derived from outside impacting and all-changing, power-developing swinging waves. For this, however, a copper pyramid must be completely closed and secured. For some time now, a pyramid boom has prevailed in various countries, so that pyramids of all kinds and sizes are traded commercially. Is there not a danger that dangerous things can arise from this?
Such things, as you say, have existed for many years, so they do not have to make an initial appearance. But all those human beings who are or have been psychologically harmed by such pyramids know or did not know that their afflicted ills were triggered by pyramids of non-conductive materials. Pyramids are actually not as harmless as the human beings of Earth assume.
This is probably an evil that will spread even further.
That will be so.
Then I have something on my own. The meditation teaching that I have written I had learned fundamentally from Svath and Asket, although I had already written a lot about it at a young age, before I brought it into its final form and published it in the 70s. And precisely because of this meditation or the meditation book, it has now happened for the second time that I was accused of having copied my scripture from another book.
I am familiar with this stupid assertion. The book that is decisive for this, from which you are told that you copied from it, is titled Spirit Training Through Mindfulness. However, you should not be disturbed by this stupid slander because, as you yourself know, it is not based on truth in any wise. The truth is that, even if you may no longer be able to remember that Sfath translated the Satipatthana method from Pali and Sanskrit scriptures into the German language for you, which Ascot then did again in 1954, so you practically had two identical translations. In 1948, at the age of 11, you wrote a manuscript from the translation of Sfath in your fourth school class, and under the guidance of teacher Lehmann, which was so good that it was copied 200 times by the teacher on a transfer printing machine and sent to many persons, including the monk Rahat Sanghanan, whom you later got to know through the help of Ascot and who taught you many things. His monk's name was Maha Chohan, which means Great Master. He was then also the one who made several copies of your work in the same year 1948 and delivered his equals, from which the first writings were already made. 1954. Ascot made you a new translation, from which you then revised and newly created your meditation writing, which you then, together with Ascot, submitted to the monk Rahat Sanghanan in the same year, when Ascot brought you to him. He found your work very good and made copies of it again, which he again sent to his peers. 1964, then, when you were in Marauli, India, at Ashoka Ashram at Swami Dharmawara in 1964, you revised your work in 3 months, which Swami Ramana Sarma, called Ananda Mahatma, thus Happy Great Soul, had printed as scripture after he had translated it into English. This scripture was also distributed by him, with 2,600 copies, 2,100 copies more than the monk Rahat Sanghanan had done in 1954. Since 1948, since your first work about meditation, different meditation books have been written with your material, but it has never been mentioned or made clear by the individual authors that the works were produced from your material. On the contrary, the individual authors always claimed to be the authors of the writings or books themselves, and even claimed that they were also the translators of the original writings from Pali and Sanskrit, although Sfath and Ascot truthfully did this work. Several of the claimants do not master Pali or Sanskrit.
And what about the person who wrote the book you mentioned? Where did this person get the knowledge of the meditation teaching I wrote?
You mean the Buddhist monk Nyanaponika. He got his meditation wisdom from your scriptures as well as from various others. The translations of Sfath and Ascot were also available to him and various others.
Yes. Now that you talk about these things, I can remember everything as it was during my school days. I did not make a dictation first, but a manuscript from which my teacher, Mr. Lehmann, worked out a much shorter dictation for the whole class. It was also my manuscript that he copied and sent. The wise old man in India, Maha Chohan, that is to say Rahat Sanghanan, did not receive my manuscript directly from teacher Lehmann, but from a monastery monk who knew teacher Lehmann and to whom he had sent my scripture.
That may be so if you...
Maha Chohan himself explained that to me.
Then it corresponds to correctness. See also 355th Contact, Friday, 2nd April 2004, 00 and 17 hours.
I now have a question about BSE, mad cow disease, which is what we call this disease. You once said that, in principle, this disease originated in sheep and had been transmitted from sheep to cattle. The disease is also transmissible to humans and to all mammals, you said.
That is correct.
In humans, the so-called kuru appears. So-called, for example, in Papua New Guinea, with the cannibals who eat their fellow species and are infected by them if they are infected by the disease. Otherwise, and in the rest of the world, the mad cow disease that can be transmitted to humans is called Creutzfeldt-Jakob syndrome if humans are affected by it. Despite these facts, The responsible doctors, veterinarians, and politicians, etc., still vehemently deny that this epidemic BSE, or mad cow disease, or scrapie, as it is called with sheep, can be transmitted to humans. It is also denied that the disease, which Quetzal also called prion disease, is transmitted to other mammals. So this also completely contrary to your interpretations. What is the other syndrome called when the other mammals are attacked by it? I have forgotten the term.
This is the Gerstmann-Streusler syndrome. All forms of mammalian life can be affected by it, and the origin is scrapie or BSE. The disease can be transmitted both by inheritance and by blood transmission, as in the case of AIDS, as well as by feces, blood and meat, by corresponding external contacts with them or by consumption of infected meat, etc. Anyone who claims that the BSE epidemic is not transmissible to humans, namely the Creutzfeldt-Jakob syndrome and Kuru, and that the Gerstmann-Streusler syndrome in mammals is not due to BSE and scrapie, or that this is even questioned, must be regarded as an irresponsible one, inhumane criminal and felon. We have 100% evidence and therefore the absolute certainty, without any doubt, that the connections and causes correspond exactly to the information I have just given you. It must be said that the BSE pathogens cannot be destroyed by a simple cooking of the meat, etc., or by meat meal production. Truthfully, they can only be destroyed by high temperatures, which must be up to 200 or even 400 degrees for mutated pathogens, which have been around for quite some time. The incubation period is also different and has to be judged according to the constitution of the life form. The incubation period varies between 3 months and 40 years, even up to 50 years. The higher the development of the life form, the longer the incubation period. So it can be up to 40 or 50 years for humans. It must also be said that the disease leaps across species through transformation and change to other mammals of all genera and species, but also to birds and fish, if they are fed with infected food.
Could you perhaps tell me the number of Earth humans who are already infected by this plague?
We could not fathom that. We base ourselves on estimates of tens of thousands. However, many of these infected will not be affected by the outbreak because their deaths will be before. One can actually look at it that way.
Well, that reminds me, though. You said that I was in Marauli with Swami Ramana Sarma, but that is only true to the extent that he came there several times and I was with him, or he was with me. But he himself was elsewhere, and that is where I learned from him. Monk Swami Dharmawara lived in the Ashoka Ashram, which was not in Marauli itself, by the way, but a little outside on Gurgaon Road. He was not Indian either, but a Cambodian, who was also the uncle or grandfather of a girl and a boy who lived with him.
I know that. I should have known that you insist on great accuracy. I will consider that in the future.
It is all right. I just wanted to make it clear. How is that with you? I mean, in your language used with the term life form or life forms and living beings. Do you describe everything that lives, creeps, and flies as living beings or life forms?
This is indeed so.
So are bacilli, bacteria, viruses, plants, vegetables, trees, and grass, etc. also called life forms?
Correct, however, what only affects applies to the flora area is not called a living being.
You mean that all that lives are termed as a life form? So all living things in the fauna as well as in the flora area, while the term living things is only valid for the fauna area, to which one must also count humans as well as life down to the microbe area, etc., while in the flora area, herbs, grass, and plants are not called living things. The question is why?
All living things in the fauna, even if they are as tiny and inconspicuous as protozoa, etc., have a form of being independent of location. This is not the case in the pure flora area, and that is not the case with any plant, because it is bound to a place.
Thank you. Next question. It is always doubted that Ptaah spaceships can fly with umpteen times the speed of light in normal space, or that objects can only fly through space with approximately the speed of light without time shifts, because Einstein's theory of relativity simply forbids this. Is the assumption correct that the calculation formulas of this theory of relativity are basically correct, but only with limitations, so that they have to be replaced by other and further additions in the end? In my opinion, this should be the case, because if I consider that certain galaxies drift apart at approximately the speed of light, without time shifts arising, then it would have to be so for this reason alone, quite apart from my own experience, which I was allowed to experience and make, due to you, during my great journey and during other occasions.
Your assumption is absolutely correct, but I am not allowed to give any official details about it and therefore no information. The actual facts and formulas must remain a secret for the Earth humans for a long time to come, for everyone. You are, of course, excluded from it.
Thanks for the honor, but if the secret of the actual facts and formulas still has to be guarded so strictly, then I do not want to have any information about it either. One never knows if I might be in a position to utter a word without thinking that could betray the secret. But would it be possible to learn more about the origin and propagation of time streams in the universe?
I have to give you the same answer here as well.
Okay, forget the question. Another question, regarding overpopulation. Is it not true that as overpopulation rises and advances, life itself begins to resist it and gradually produces more and more epidemics and diseases to resist the growing overpopulation? And is it not the case that through the prevalence of human beings, their bodies and organs as well as the entire immune system become more and more susceptible, softer and inadequate, as is also the case with consciousness? Allergies must also become more diverse and more frequent as a result of population growth, with pollution of the entire environment also playing an important role. People are becoming more and more lenient and softer in their responsibility, even to the point of complete irresponsibility, which is also reflected in the fact that criminals of all kinds are always judged in a false humanist manner and given less severe punishments, often to impunity. The form of thinking and searching for the meaning of life is more and more influenced by sectarian and religious idiocies, which lead to more and more sectarian fanaticism and complete alienation from the world, etc., etc. Must not nature and life itself ultimately build up such a resistance? For example, through epidemics and elementary catastrophes, that humans, in their overpopulation, are wiped out in the hundreds or billions. I can remember that Quetzal and Simyase once said that such things had happened on other planets before.
That is right. If humans on a planet become too many, then nature and life become involved independently and forcefully stems too many forms of life. Such containment and eradication of the supernumerary forms of life, in this case, humans, takes place first and foremost by epidemics as well as by the fact that the forms of life, in this case again, are made weak or even incapable of living by softening the body, the organs, and the immune system. Nature and life also defend themselves against an excess of humans, etc., by elementary catastrophes.
This was also the case about 6 years ago with Kohan's people, on the planet in the Centauri area, which had 120,120,000 humans, and which is somewhat delayed to our time and space.
Yes, that is how it was explained to you.
Do you know the number of humans who were wiped out? And how was that humanity decimated?
Only 1.26 billion 160,000 humans still live there today. The population decimation took place exactly according to your statements you just made.
But why could they accumulate or give birth to so many humans before nature and life drastically intervened?
Not all humans on the planet itself were born there, but only 3.7 billion 3,700,000. Another 62 billion 62,000 came from planets other than refugees, from 26 different worlds, which were eliminated by an interplanetary war after humans could still flee. Within a few years, the great mass of humanity on the planet in question doubled, while the epidemics and catastrophes eradicated billions of humans early on, before the final great deaths began.
Now a question about the Noandakan, known to us as Noah. During our last conversation we also talked about him, but under the name Noankadnosser. Are they two different people or are they one and the same person? If so, why do you use two different names?
It is the same man who is called Noah on the earth. But Noah is only the short name of Noandakan or Noankadnosser. Noandakan is a name that goes back to the ancient Lyran language and was used by the ancient Lyrans on the earth, while the name Noankadnosser was coined and used by the earth humans. So when we talk about Noah or Noandakan and Noankadnosser in this way, we are always talking about the same name, which by the way means man of rest.
From which earthly language then does the name Noankadnosser originate?
The language died out about 80,000 years ago. The name for it was Centilin.
Thank you. Unfortunately, we here on Earth have no knowledge about such things from such old times. But there is another question that comes to my mind, about the people who died on the planet in the Centauri area. How long did the whole process take? Do you know about that?
Certainly. The time of the Great Death lasted only 21 months.
Ah man, 119,119,000 humans, dead in only 21 months. But if nature and life strike once, then they do it thoroughly. But nevertheless. That is madness.
Nature and life do not see it that so, because they are not capable of that. But they are able to impulsively grasp a situation that is dangerous for nature and life, which inevitably leads to corresponding countermeasures. Of course, these are not thought processes, but only logical effects according to the laws of cause and effect.
Of course, the law of causality, but it is precisely this law that the terrestrial human disregards, even if deadly consequences will result from it. Perhaps humankind will not be so crassly wiped out as in the case of those we have just talked about, but the great dying will nevertheless spread evil. That is certain for me. In some form this dying will come.
That is also our view.
But first, the Earthlings will continue to drive us crazy. If I think only of television, radio, and the press, which literally cultivate all evils by glorifying violence through films and books as well as theater and so on. Also, news and other sensational reports belong to it. The more TV, radio, and press report about atrocities like murder and manslaughter, mass murders, torture, sectarian excesses, wars and revolutions, rape, drug addiction, alcoholism, medication addiction, capital crimes, racial and xenophobic hatred, extremism, neo-Nazism, Ku Klux Klan, death penalty, etc. The more the media are informed about the violence. The more imitators appear, the more they take an example from the reports and events and begin to act likewise. TV, radio and newspaper reports, etc. about such degenerate events and acts have the same effect as when petrol or explosives are poured or thrown into the fire. The fire is ignited explosively, or a huge explosion takes place. Press, television, and radio reports are based solely on sensationalism. They must be banned at all costs, freedom of the press or not. In any case, such sensational reports only promote violence and the whole crime as well as contempt for human beings and much more in the same framework. This is also the case with the alleged anti-war films and the endless repetitions of feature films, as well as book presentations of factual reports on the cruel events of the Second World War. These films and books also produce the opposite of what is propagated. Instead of thinking and becoming peaceful through these films and books, etc., the human being becomes only more aggressive through all the endless nonsense, whereby all evil is promoted even more, namely the desire to transgress, the desire and the sense to kill, to murder and manslaughter, to torture, torment, the most vicious violence, to criminality, hatred, human trafficking, slavery, prostitution, child abuse and child killing, contempt for humans, greed, envy, rape, sexual degeneration, destruction of evolution, destruction of life, extermination, misery and misery as well as all the cruelest evils more, exactly as it is shown in these films or illustrated and written in books, newspapers and magazines, as it is said on the radio and shown on television or in theatrical performances. All this, however, is fueled by brutal and horrific films, which many people are addicted to, because their intelligence is not sufficient to recognize the nonsense and the tremendous dangers of human brutalization and consciousness stupefaction. And all this is tolerated by the responsible persons of all governments, and often still supported, because they are too blind, stupid, uneducated, illogical, and even stupid, as a result of which they do not see and do not recognize the truth and the effectivities. They promote all evils and hardships and all misery by branching off subsidies from taxpayers' money, and by glorifying violence and all human degenerations, up to and including absolute contempt for humans and destruction of life, for film, book and art makers, who often glorify violence and all human degenerations through their dubious and often blatant nonsense works, always under the guise that their works are directed against destruction, degeneration, and destruction.
For each word I can only admit to you that each one corresponds to the full truth and reality, and that there is no doubt about it.
My next question. What kind of salutation do you use? Do you use titles, surnames, or first names? And what about formal and informal use of you?
Surnames are common with us, but in a different form than with terrestrial humans. But they do not carry any weight in the salutation from person to person, because the salutation only takes place by first name. Otherwise, the surname is of course used, for example, for the place of residence or the registry, etc. When speaking with each other personally, however, only the first name comes into effect, whereby also the you is given. A formal you form as it is used by terrestrial humans is alien to us.
Thank you. How does the Ptaah number system work?
What do you mean?
Do you have the decimal system as we know it? I mean, whether you have the 0 and the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9?
That is right. Since time immemorial, we have used the system of tens, as it is characteristic of all earthly advanced civilizations.
If one can speak of advanced civilizations at all, if one considers the chaos of the most diverse cultures. But tell me, how did the Earthlings come up with this number system?
Through impulse telepathic teachings from our side.
I should have guessed. In order to obtain higher values, do you also string the numbers 1 to 9 or the 0 together?
That is the case, yes. The earthly number system goes back to our origin.
Of course, how thoughtless of me. Can you record the 10 digits in your spelling for me?
You can read them here on this device. Here, these are the digits.
Wait, I will copy them out quickly. Simple, actually, when you look at them. So that is it, thank you. Can you still tell me who or which peoples of the Earthlings were the lucky ones who received the impulse telepathic teachings for the number system?
The impulse telepathic teachings were given to mathematically gifted humans in India.
Aha. And then the Arabs took over the system from them, did they not?
Yes, but the numbers of the Earth humans, the Indians, and the Arabs were formed differently from ours, which we still use today.
Thank you once again. What do you think about this? Because of the overpopulation that is rampant on the Earth, an enormous cruelty to animals is rampant, especially caused by animal factories and animal transports, as well as by the slaughter of animals. In the animal factories, the animals are force-fed with the most evil force and are kept under conditions which make of every description. As in the case of the transport of animals, the animals suffer agony, are wounded, die miserably, and are completely destroyed mentally. The animals are even denied that they have a psyche, although the opposite is the case. Even when they are slaughtered, the animals are still in agony. This happens every day to countless millions of animals, including pigs, chickens, geese, rabbits, cattle of all kinds, horses and donkeys, sheep, goats, turkeys and camels, even crocodiles, turtles, birds, ostriches and kangaroos, fish and seafood, etc., and so on. Due to the constantly increasing overpopulation, the demand for animal food is constantly growing and is increasing immeasurably. As a result, the oceans are also emptied of fish, and one species after another is exterminated. Not only is more and more cultivated land being destroyed, forests cut down and destroyed, the environment and nature destroyed, and total exploitation of the Earth's resources practiced, but fauna life is also abused, maltreated, tortured, and destroyed. A monstrosity without equal. It is howling when you think about these things. And all because the Earthling criminally increases and advances their population mass in such a manner that only misery and need, degenerations of all kinds, and roaring contempt for humanity, as well as contempt for life, arise at all.
Of course you are right with every word, and of course I am also fully of your opinion, which is founded on real facts.
Is it not also the case with regard to overpopulation that the more densely people live together, as for example in villages and cities, the more susceptible people become to diseases, that they become more and more effeminate, numb and indifferent to each other and to the entire environment, life and nature?
This is also true, yes, also in relation to the inexorably growing overpopulation and the mixture of peoples associated with it.
Of course, it cannot be any different. But what do you think about it, or what is behind it? In America, where else could it be? There is a young woman who is spiritually wandering around claiming to be a Venusian, a woman from the planet Venus, where humans live under domes.
This person is very well known to us under the name Omnek Onek, as she calls herself. Her assertions are of course absolute nonsense, and correspond to mischievous machinations and even schizophrenic origin.
That is exactly what the lady, Omnek Onek, calls herself. A madwoman who mumbles and smacks out her bona fide stupid followers.
So it is.
Again, something concerning the overpopulation. It is only a statement that has to be pronounced once, due to the inexorable growth of the human population. More and more cultivated land is being built over. More and more free nature is disappearing and being destroyed, and with it inevitably the habitat of wild animals.
Right.
Tell me, my friend, is it possible that a radio-controlled wristwatch can cause discomfort? As you know, I have such a watch that I wore day and night until 2 months ago. Ever since I had worn this timepiece, the back of my hand was regularly in such pain that I could not even write anymore. 2 months ago, the pain even spread over the entire forearm and upper arm, crept into the shoulder and neck behind the right ear, and then caused headaches. Despite diligent smearing and ointments with rheumatism medication, the pain remained and even intensified from day to day. When I pondered what could be the cause of this pain, which was obviously inflammatory in nature, the thought suddenly struck me that perhaps my radio wristwatch was to blame and the origin because of the radio waves. What do you think?
Your reflection led you to the right solution, I'm sure of it. Any apparatus worn on or on the body and dependent on radio waves is extremely harmful to health, and under certain circumstances even destroys the body or organs, or is even life-threatening. A radio-controlled wristwatch is sufficient for this, as you have experienced at first hand. Such timepieces or even telephones and radio intercoms are not recommendable, but very dangerous, if they are not so secured and shielded that the radio waves cannot harm the human body. Radio waves are electromagnetic waves or electromagnetic swinging waves, which are dangerous for all life if they hit this in too high a mass. This danger exists not only in radio waves, but also in power lines, generators and transformers, etc. The health damage caused to humans and animals by such waves or swinging waves can be purely physical as well as psychological and consciousness-based. So from rashes and allergies to cancer and psychological destruction to complete stupefaction, everything is possible. Also, all kinds of plants, insects, and microorganisms, down to the microbes, etc., are affected by illness and destruction if they are influenced in the mentioned form. Any damage is always present, even if it is often not immediately recognized. And it is also the rule that such damage to health is not recognized in its real cause and consequently attributed to a different and inappropriate origin. However, before the dangerous electromagnetic influences cause visible damage to humans, it results that the human magnetic sense is disturbed or very quickly destroyed. This magnetic sense, which is peculiar to humans as well as animals and insects, is already largely destroyed in terrestrial humans, because it has been in constant and very strongly increased influence for many decades by artificially generated electromagnetic waves or oscillations, which go far beyond the normal planet-given mass, and which the humans of the Earth generate themselves through their inconsideration. As a result, the human being has not been able to apply his or her magnetic sense and to let it work for a long time, whereby they can no longer recognize, no longer grasp, and no longer perceive many things and events of nature, as animals and other forms of life are still able to do, but which, however, are more and more damaged in their magnetic sense by the guilt of the earth human. Many birds and animals, for example, orient themselves according to their magnetic sense when they carry out their annual hikes or flights to other regions, often walking or flying over many thousands of kilometers. However, these migratory animals and migratory birds are becoming more and more susceptible to magnetic sense disorders, which means that an enormous number of birds and animals die. Whales, for example, lose their orientation due to ship noises and echo sounders or sonar, etc., and beach somewhere on shores or in rivers, where they perish miserably, which often happens more and more with other water inhabitants. Also, herds of many wild animals lose their orientation more and more often because their magnetic sense is disturbed, whereby they often flee in panic over rock walls and abysses and fall to their deaths. Thunderstorms, earthquakes, and violent elementary storms, etc., develop reinforced magnetic waves or magnetic swinging waves as well as volcanic eruptions. These amplified electromagnetic swinging waves are registered by the animals and birds, etc., after which they behave accordingly, and thus, for example, take flight or seek shelter somewhere. The human being is also capable of this if their magnetic sense is not damaged. The Earth human, however, has unfortunately lost this ability for a long time, which can also be traced back to his or her early softening. which progresses more and more, because they distance themselves more and more from living together with nature and the creational laws and recommendations, and consequently unlearns more and more.
But how does this rhyme with the technological and medical progress made by the Earth humans? By which I mean genetic engineering, gene therapy, gene medicine, genetic corrections, and gene manipulations, etc.? Also, the creation of an artificial human being, as well as clones and human genetic changes, belong to this progress, even if many of these things are only in their initial stages.
Despite all degeneration and destruction, progress cannot be stopped. That is an immutable law. At some point, there will simply be stagnation, but until then, progress will continue for a long time to come and will only decrease very slowly and gradually.
But all the things I mentioned before, they will still be developed further, or even rediscovered and worked out until perfection is reached, or simply the best possible state. This will happen in spite of all opposition and prohibitions, as well as concerns and screams that progress impeders, and especially sectarians and authorities organize. Because everything is allegedly against nature and all ethics, and above all, corresponds to a blasphemy without equal, which is of course complete nonsense. In my opinion, and after all I know of you, on the one hand, the entire development around the gene, science and gene manipulation, gene change, gene influence, gene conversion, gene medicine, and in general the whole gene technology, etc., will not be stopped, because this is an inevitable consequence of the development. So the entire genetic engineering will find its breakthrough against all the cries of contrast of every kind, and indeed inexorably, although perhaps a little later than just before, but nevertheless inexorably and determinedly in all areas of life. So one day humans will also create genetically manipulated clones and artificial humans such as androids, which are equipped with a semi-mechanical, semi-biotechnical body and an artificial bio-brain. Just as humans are genetically modified and will undoubtedly soon live much longer and even centuries through genetic modifications and influences, etc., so too will genetic modifications be made to animals and plants as well as to food and medicine, etc. All this is really unstoppable, even if many sectarians, false humanists, false-seeing and false-thinking humans of today still rise up against it and shout stupidly against it and think up laws against it, which should forbid this progress. But such laws are already wrong today, and whoever refuses to do so is acting irresponsibly. It is only right to oppose it where creational unlawfulness is produced through genetic manipulation, and in fact where life is destroyed or driven to degeneration in behavior, action, and life. Through genetic engineering, a freedom from suffering and disease can be worked out for humans, as well as an enormous number of advantages and facilitations and an immeasurable progress, which can also prevent a further increase in overpopulation and cause much need and misery to disappear, if this development is given the necessary space and understanding.
Your words correspond completely to my sense.
Many human beings deal with this subject, but many others are of the stupid and uneducated opinion that everything is just fantasy. This has been so since time immemorial, which is why Jules Verne and Leonardo da Vinci and many others have always been called charlatans and fantasists. Truthfully, however, it is the case that nothing at all that the human being can devise, dream up, conceive and fantasize is simply unfeasible. For truthfully, the human being man cannot conceive, fantasize, dream up, or devise anything that is not feasible or producible. Everything that the human being can conceive, devise, dream up, or fantasize about is possible and feasible in a technological or consciousness-based or in any other manner. So, there is nothing for the human being in the whole universe that is not feasible and not producible for him or her when he or she conceives, concocts, fantasizes, or dreams something. The only things that are not feasible, not producible, or not creatable for him or her are delusions, such as religious delusion and fanaticism, etc., as well as illusions, which has delusions and fictitious images, etc., which impair the consciousness of the deluded ones.
You expressed that very aptly.
Do you know anything about giants who lived here on the Earth? I mean, where they lived?
Of course, you can even find giant skeletons if you only search for them, like in Cape Santa Helena, Ecuador, Lake Titicaca, Mexico, Palestine, and many other places. Various skeletons have also been found at the locations mentioned so far.
I did not know. But I know that the Anakites and the Raphaites lived in Palestine, who were also giants.
That corresponds to correctness.
In one of our last conversations, you mentioned the number of deaths caused by Christianity during its work up to 31.12. 1992 through wars, church courts, and fanaticism, etc. But you also mentioned the number of human beings murdered by other religions during the last 3,000 years. The question is, are all those murdered also included who were slaughtered by Judaism 3,500 years ago?
Your question refers to the time before 1500 BC?
Exactly, this time I mean.
A moment. These dates are not familiar to me. So I must retrieve them? Yes. Here, during the time of 1,000 years. Further back calculated from the year 1500 BC, a total number of 94,630 humans were slaughtered mostly brutally and bestially by the forefathers of the Jews, the Hebrews, etc.
An enormous number of humans, who found a violent death in only 1,000 years through religious madness and racial delusion, as well as by fanaticism. Religious courts, orders of God, religious wars, and God judgments, as well as further madness by a single megalomaniac and faith-mad, degenerate little people. A number which is almost identical with the humans who were murdered in about 200 years by insane sectarians. But even today, countless humans are murdered by religious delusion and fanaticism, in many cases even en masse. Religions and sects are currently more powerful than ever, even if it often appears otherwise. Religions, together with science, politics, crime, technology, the military, and every form of economy, have seized total power. Never before has any form of life possessed such power over the earth as the human of today. And all those human beings who embody and exercise this earth-dominating power, those who are concerned about it, are so irresponsible that they never feel affected and never concerned. They all live irresponsibly and thoughtlessly at the expense of our and all of humanity's descendants. And often these irresponsible ones bear great names, but in many cases they are humans who bear great names, and titles are only great, irresponsible, and mean criminals. They all do not give a damn that the universe, the galaxies, the earth and all forms of life, nature and life itself, and therefore also humankind, are a holy thought and a holy work of the creation. The mistaken and guilty not only play the people, but also themselves, and many times they think they are better and bigger and smarter than they really are. They have never heard anything about the fact that the human being should only see himself or herself as great and portray themselves as they really are. According to the motto, always confess what you really are. These humans also want to be praised and only feel comfortable when they are praised and adored because they are addicted to praise and image. So they cannot understand that they do not have any real friends, but only sycophants and parasites that do not dare to criticize and are only concerned with their own welfare and food. They all do not understand that whoever criticizes a human in their deeds, thoughts, feelings, lifestyle, opinions, etc., in a thoughtful and justifiable framework, is their real friend. But whoever praises and omits criticism is the worst enemy.
Your words in the guilty ear.
Even if they hear it, hardly anyone will care about it, precisely because they are so self-righteous in their irresponsibility that they do not feel affected. But now back again to the alleged abductions of Earthlings by extraterrestrials, especially in America and South America, and recently also in Germany. Such assertions occur again and again, whereby various attempts have been made to prove the truth of the statements by hypnosis. If the assertions were correct, then already more than 3.5 million Earth humans would have been examination contacted, and many women, particularly Americans and South Americans, would have been impregnated. It is even absurdly claimed that children have already been born from such impregnations, half earthly, half extraterrestrial, called hybrids.
Everything corresponds to unbelievable nonsense. First, there have been very few incidents of examination contacts for years. And second, there have been no impregnations of Earth women by extraterrestrial intelligences. The so-called hybrids, reported by unreasonable newspaper and journal makers, are nothing more than abortions and mutations of a purely terrestrial nature, which are due to genetic damage, etc., caused by the parents or by environmental influences of a highly harmful nature which can be very diverse. There is no doubt that at present there are no descendants on the Earth or anywhere else on the Earth who have been conceived by extraterrestrials with Earth women or by Earth men with extraterrestrial women. Other claims correspond to infamous lies and slander, no matter whether they come from Elizabeth Clarer or from some other lunatics who currently claim this. Even such assertions made under hypnosis usually correspond only to lies and slander, which are either invented by the hypnotized themselves or are tricked in by third parties, or even by the person who carries out the hypnosis. In complete contrast to the assertion that people under hypnosis would not lie and cheat and thus always tell the truth, there is the fact that under hypnosis one can lie and cheat just as in the normal state without hypnosis. And exactly this fact is exploited by many in the matter of UFOs and alleged kidnappings, etc., because the persons concerned want to make themselves great and distinguish themselves with it. Often only a hypnotic state is faked, which is not difficult for humans and cannot be determined and recognized by the inexperienced hypnotists of the Earth. In this state of pretense, people lie and cheat just as they do in real hypnosis.
All-around lies and deception that crack the beams. But it is also constantly claimed that the evil extraterrestrials also massacre animals, for example cattle.
This assertion is also based on slanderous assumptions of some lunatics, as well as on quite conscious lies and deceptions. If massacred animals are found, especially in the USA and South America, this can be traced back to completely natural causes, namely beating and tearing, as well as the feeding of birds of prey or predators. Various species of vermin also play an important role, including mutant species. Even certain irresponsible human beings massacre animals for testing purposes or to stir up fear of aliens, etc.
3 alien races have been on Earth for several years, you said. Do they also have stations here, if they are constantly present?
Only one of the 3 groups is still stationed on Earth for some time, while the other 2 groups appear only sporadically or periodically.
And new aliens, how often do they come into contact with the Earth?
That is quite different. In earlier times, it happened only twice that during a period of 100 years, more than 2 groups of non-earthly intelligences flew into the earthly space. Usually, such occurrences are only sporadic, as often as many hundreds or thousands of years pass before another alien race reaches Earth. Sometimes several thousand years pass before such an event takes place again.
All the nonsense that is told and spread about UFOs and extraterrestrials on the Earth has spread like a festering ulcer.
Whereby also the actual UFO sightings and observations are denigrated and referred to the realm of fantasy and delusions of the senses.
That is indeed so.
The 3 groups that fly in and out of the earthly space besides you, had they once had real contacts with Earth humans?
No.
But did they have any examination contacts?
That only applies to their two groups.
That was actually my last official question. So now we can get to the other things, if you do not mind, my friend.
Of course.